an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood, Episode 60, Eye of Heaven, Gateway of Earth. In this episode, so just let me know if I have this wrong. Father wants to become God? Do I have that right? Either become or eat. Either way. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. So, first of all, thank you all for bearing with me with the weirdness of having to reschedule quite a few episodes lately. Just like very recently, it's been kind of a problem. So sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully, we don't run into any more of that in this last stretch. It would be such a shame if like something happened, the finale or penultimate episode, and I had to reschedule to a weird day where nobody could come. So, it is so tempting to start at the end, you guys. And I know that I do that sometimes. And it will work out. But I don't feel like that'll be really... I don't feel like that's the way to go this time. So I'm going to start from the beginning properly. And we shall go from there. So, when we open, we have got a sort of like, what's the word I want here? It's like we're checking in with a lot of the people who are outside of the main building, Central. There's a bunch of dudes who are advancing on the radio station where the Führer's wife is being held and she doesn't realize she's being held. And they say that they want to negotiate. And these guys are coming up with this huge riot shield, essentially. And the one who comes through, it's Brosh is his name, is that right? And Ross sees him and is like, oh, okay, I know that we can trust this guy. This is fine. And he walks up and he sees Ross. And there's this really nice moment of the two of them locking eyes and it being like, it is you. And I love Ross just smiles and then does a little wave. But then Brosh completely loses his mind and just starts screaming and crying. And it is really funny. I just love her expression of alarm as she realizes that he is having a much more intense reaction than she was expecting. And of course he is, because Ross, you never thought Brosh was dead. You knew he was fine. He thought you were dead, that you had been burned alive. I mean, yeah, dude has every right. I'm just saying. So then we cut to a cup of tea and a sandwich on a plate. What is it about food in cartoons? Is it just the most delectable looking thing? Is it just me? I want that sandwich deeply. I don't even really like sandwiches that much. I never really think to make sandwiches. I don't keep bread and sandwich ingredients around. It's not a thing that I think of. But this perfect sandwich next to this beautiful cup of tea, and I was like, oh, that's the stuff. Yes. And I feel like I have this a lot when I watch anime, especially because it's like a new thing to me. Candace commissioned me to watch Your Name, and there is so much food in Your Name that I'm looking at and I'm like, oh my God, the pancakes, I want them. Anyway, so she is saying, is there a way that I can see my husband? And the guy that's like interviewing her doesn't have an answer, but Breda interrupts and is like, I'm really sorry, but it's very dangerous out there. We don't know who's on what side, who we can trust. I know that it's difficult, but we can't take the risk, so please be patient. And she says, yes, I didn't think about that. So she's being pretty docile here and pretty accepting of what they're suggesting, which makes sense, you know. And then we cut down to Father. Now, I know that I have sort of said before I've seen people in the chat, oh God, food porn and anime. And Zajiga says anime food usually looks delicious. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that it's not just me because, you know. But Father, his body is so weird now because he's not contained. So, like, in general, he can just shapeshift because he doesn't have a body. Saying that is like kind of a misnomer. The form that he's taking right now is humanoid, but honestly, the overall shape that he has, because he's got wider hips, he actually kind of looks from the set of him like a middle-aged woman. And he then slips in and out of all of these other forms through the course of this episode because he's using whatever shape he needs to get the job done in the moment. But he's asking Ed, he says, so you're just rejecting a truth that you don't want to believe? And Ed says, yeah, that's about the size of it. Because reminder, the last episode ended with Ed saying, I am not going to believe that just because he got caught up in a transmutation circle that he wanted nothing to do with, he has to suffer the same consequences as a bunch of people who did that shit on purpose. I just don't buy it. And he is saying, well, fight. You aren't going to just like, I hope you don't expect us to lay down and die and accept that we're sacrifices. And Father says, it's too late. You're already in my stomach. And then we go to Darius and what is the name of the other guy? And they are looking down into the hole that May dropped through. And it's all of this weird, like, the material is black. And it sort of looks like the top of a cloud, like when you're in a plane and you fly over the clouds and there's that sort of bumpy surface beneath you that like moves slightly. It's like that. So last episode, I was so confused because they get brought through a portal into a certain room, but then May, who does not go through a portal, is able to literally just drop through the ceiling and be there with them in the room that it looked like took magic to get them to. So I was extremely like thrown for a loop at the fact that apparently they all got disintegrated and reformed in this room simply because that was the most convenient way to get them there, but not because they were on some different plane of existence. And yet, at this point, these guys are looking down at essentially a ceiling that has reformed of the room that Ed and Al and everybody is in. I have to assume that were they to simply jump down, they wouldn't drop into the room. But I actually don't know because later on, there's sort of a rising tide of blackness, and I couldn't tell if it was just gas or shadow or, you know, if it was the kind of thing that you could move around. And maybe if they had decided to just throw caution to the wind and jump, they would have dropped right through it. I can't decide. But yeah, they're all just like standing around staring at it, Hawkeye as well. And there's a flash to, you know, when the Fuhrer says, I can't vouch for his well-being, but he's definitely still alive. And Hawkeye gets an expression on her face that I can only describe as like, oh, okay, we'll see about that. But we don't see her take action. It's just sort of a vibe. When we go back down into apparently his stomach, which I guess is just a room. I don't know. I'm a little confused by this still. May decides that she's going to face off with Father. And says, I hear you're immortal. That's all I need. I'll handle this one, Alphonse. Girl, what are you thinking? She seems to believe just because he can't, like, stop her from using alkahestry, that means that he is vulnerable. And I just feel like she's just such a child here. There is no reason to assume that just because you still have powers, you can take this guy. The fact that he has a means of stopping them from using alchemy that you don't even understand to begin with indicates he knows more than you. Indicates that he is out of your league. And she is just not thinking this through. And she decides that she's going to fucking attack. And Ed is like, all right, well, I guess if she's determined to do that, we will take Pride. And he looks over at Pride and sees that he's remembering the moment where part of his face sort of crumbled away. And he thinks, how is it that they were able to force Roy through the portal? I don't understand that. If he can strong arm us through the gate, why hasn't he done it before? And Roy says, shortly before I was deconstructed, Salim said it was their last resort and they didn't have any other choice. And Ed says, which means it must carry some kind of risk for them. So I am hoping that that's part of the thing that I was saying in the last episode where I was like, they've never experimented with trying a person who didn't choose this before. I really felt like if you were going to be doing something this major, you would have explored all your options. And maybe they have tried it and they've gotten inconsistent results. Maybe it works sometimes, but not all the time or something like that. So in any case, I think that's probably what it is. And Ed is looking at Pride, who, by the way, is continuing to crumble. And him and Al, they start using their alchemy and begin to pursue Pride, who doesn't fight back using his shadows. He does a little bit later. So I was a bit confused because I thought that they were saying, oh, I guess in here he can't use them, period. But he does start to. So I don't know if it's supposed to be that he's like too weak and he needs to be powered up to a certain degree to be able to use them. But regardless, the fight begins here with May going up against Father. And Father is... He uses alchemy to turn a knife that May hits him in the head with into a giant blade the size of, the pit and the pendulum. I imagine that this is sort of the size the blade on the pendulum would be. But yeah, I love this moment because Father says, I didn't invite you and I have no need of you. Please leave. Like, he's being weirdly formal about everything, which doesn't, it's hitting really weird because he's got there's a real sort of like mischievous quality to parts of what he does. And then a sort of tired old man quality to other things he does. And it throws me for a bit of a loop. And I think maybe that's on purpose. But it's just really weird because, especially with the eyes all over him and being like inky darkness, he looks like the dwarf in the jar, who was a cackling little fucking gremlin. And there are shades of that, but then there's this formality and sort of like, can't you just cooperate and make this? I just wanted to get this done today. I swear to God, everybody has to make things a big chore. And I don't know what to do with it. So May uses her alchemy to bind him in place, so she thinks. And she's soaring through the air coming down on this guy when all of a sudden Hempstool's head busts out of Father's side and says, "No, young lady, he's not actually trapped." And he tries to warn her. And she doesn't either process what he said in time, doesn't believe him, or thinks that she's going to be able to land such a blow that even if he isn't trapped, she'll still hurt him somehow. I don't know. But she goes ahead, lands her kick, and we just see like this red electricity, and she flies off of him like 15 feet, and there's blood in the air as she falls. I don't know what he did to her exactly. It was very upsetting to see her as tiny as she is, surrounded by like bloody raindrops as she flies through the air. I didn't like it. I don't really care for May as a character, as you guys know. She's very up and down for me. She's probably the weakest link, in my opinion, in terms of like people who have been here for a while now. But she's still so very tiny, you know? And I just... May, what are you doing? So, I love this scene. We go outside and we see that the beginning of the eclipse is starting. And some dude comes up and it's like, "Reporting in, sir, the city's been overrun by Ishvalan terrorists. They seem to be attacking the MP." And then all of a sudden a dude literally drops down from the bridge above his head and like tackles the guy to the ground. And Scar's old master comes up behind the other two and gets them in the side of the neck in such a way that they just drop. And he says, "Pardon me. We simply do not have the time to explain. Please forgive us." And that cracked me up. Later on, there are some Ishvalans in, is it Hughes's wife's house? I can't remember, but they're in someone's house. And she's freaking out, and they're like, hey, really sorry. We hate to intrude. Can you just point out on the map where we are real quick? And that cracked me up also. They're trying so hard to just be polite, and understandably, somebody breaks into your house. Like, yeah, you're not going to react with equanimity to that. That's fair. But it is very funny. I'm looking at her. No, that's not Hughes's wife. Totally different person. But yeah, can you tell us, is this your house here on the map? I love her looking and crying and then being like, "Wait, what?" And she nods. So throughout all of this, we keep getting the shots of the eclipse. And you guys, do you know what I kept thinking about in this scene? And did any of you see the tweet that Neil deGrasse Tyson made about how, I think he says, a lunar eclipse is like actually not spectacular to look at all. I don't even remember if it was a lunar or solar, but either way, he essentially was just like, everybody keeps talking about the eclipse like it's a big deal. It's actually not a big deal at all. It's really boring, and everybody just should calm down and not be that excited about it. And this man, like, his entire deal is trying to educate people on the wonders of the universe, and yet he has to come out here and be like, "Well, I mean, if you find this thing impressive, actually, you're kind of a loser who is stupid." Like, sir, what happened to you? Go find something a hobby that gives you some joy, because you just seem to have lost it all. Anyway, I kept thinking about that with this. So then we see them like unfolding one of the other maps that they've got, and it's an alchemy circle. And that looks slightly different, reminder, the way that the lines are set up in the middle of it. And I just find it really interesting, the way like they differ. I think that's cool, and I want more details about that. But anyway, one of the guys says, "Good, then we just wait. Scar, it's up to you." What? What is up to him? What is up to him? What is he supposed to do? I just don't... What are they going to do? It feels like they've got a way to try and thwart Father somehow. But I can't figure out how that would even happen. So, anyway, then we go to Scar. And here we've got Bradley just waxing poetical about how everything boils down to fighting for your life and staying alive and yada, yada, yada. And he says, "I've never felt more complete. I guess you could say I've finally arrived." Bradley, you felt so intimidating. And that's not to say that I don't believe you can fight all of a sudden. But there is just something about your vibe here that is killing it for me. And not in a good way. You've killed the vibe. I was extremely impressed. And then you just had to keep talking. And now it's sort of gone. You feel like you're trying to give things meaning that doesn't exist. And it seems like you believe it does exist, and it's really doing it for you. And I guess I'm happy for you. Okay. But you're sort of attempting to connect with Scar on this level. And I don't really see that being a thing that you two have in common. So it just seems like a losing proposition to me. You're talking to yourself, mostly. So anyway, the two of them get into a real hell of a fight. This is pretty fun. Seeing him fight Greed was a good time because of how sort of unexpected that was. But the way that he's like up against Scar, it feels like they're a lot more closely matched. And Greed was holding his own for a time, but it became quickly clear he wasn't up to it. He's just not at Bradley's level. So seeing Scar, I mean, they are really going hammer and tongs, as they say. And Scar at one point breaks Bradley's sword, and Bradley just grabs the blade in midair and stabs it into Scar's arm. And he's screaming, bringing the second blade down. And Scar puts a hand down and shoves Bradley off him with alchemy, making all of these like spikes. And all of a sudden, there's like, this was a bit of a moment here. You see all of these spikes come up. He gets shoved backward and he's bleeding. And Scar is beside the spikes that have come up out of the ground. And he says, "I am a little bit surprised myself. It goes against my beliefs. I even swore to myself I'd never use it." And he pulls his like cloak jacket off. But when I considered the enormity of what was at stake and what I could do, I relented and accepted my only choice. My brother's circle of reconstruction. I've accepted both halves of alchemy. Is did he heal himself or something? What is it? Because, like, the making of the spikes is regular alchemy that we've seen before, right? Am I mistaking that somehow? I'm not entirely sure what I was supposed to have seen right there that felt like a completely new thing. And I feel bad because that obviously was meant to be a moment. He takes his jacket off. It's all very dramatic. Bradley is shocked. And I have no idea what the significance of this is supposed to be. He has a blade still going through his hand that he yanks out. And I don't like... Okay, so... Greed had to fight a healthy Bradley. With Scar, Bradley is already heavily injured. That's true. Scar created something with alchemy. Previously, he could only destroy things. Oh. I guess that it just never sank into me that he couldn't make things. I just assumed he didn't. I think that was the part that isn't, like, hitting for me. I never and I don't know, like, if I was supposed to think that he actually couldn't do what the boys could do, but I never did. I just assumed he didn't. He was just trying to do the opposite of whatever they did because that was never what an alchemist expected. And it was a really effective weapon. So he just relied on that. So, okay. I just didn't, I wish that I had, like, been thinking the way they clearly intended for me to think. Because then this might have hit more, but it did not hit at all. So, sorry, everybody. Damien says he tattooed himself from his brother's notes. Yeah, and, like, again, we knew he had tattoos, so... like, that wasn't a reveal that felt like anything to me either. Sajegi said his left arm could only destroy, and he used the time skip to make tattoos for creating things with his right hand. Okay, so it's supposed to be that this is a very new development. He has only done this in the past few months to create with his right hand. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Did not do anything. But what can you do? It's not always going to do anything. So, and Bradley seems like quite taken by surprise. He really thought that he had this right now, obviously. So when we go back down into Father's belly, I guess, we see May continuing to fly across the room. Ed tells Al, go and help with May. I'm going to handle Pride on my own. And Pride has a real sulky sort of expression here. And the whole way that he's fighting back, this is when the shadows do begin to come into play. He does start using them. And that was part of what puzzled me as well, is like initially he wasn't. And then all of a sudden he starts to. And I guess it's supposed to be that, like, he doesn't want to damage the two sacrifices, but Ed is pushing it so hard that he kind of has to. And when we go over to Father, he has made a gun out of this material he's made out of and just starts to shoot at her, which there is something about him repeatedly pulling the trigger with this big grin of delight on his face that is so unnerving. I swear to God. I think that's like the most disturbing he's been. And Al throws himself in front of May and begins to just take the shots on his back like a true hero. So Ed and Al's fight, there's a moment where Ed says, "What's the matter, Pride? Your attacks are a little bit more half-assed than usual." And Pride is like, well, you haven't fulfilled your purpose. So I am not going to, come at you with everything in the first place. And then also, you have always thought that you are like, because you're smaller than everybody that you fight, you don't have a lot of experience fighting those who are smaller than you. And when Ed turns, all of these blades come up from the ground like shadow blades, and you just see gouts of blood. And I keep being sort of fooled by this. Whenever somebody gets injured on this show, there is like so much blood that it always gives the impression for a minute, this is an injury that's going to take them out of the game entirely. And it's rarely true. Sometimes it is. But I keep thinking that like every time it happens. So with this attack on Ed, I had a real moment of like, oh God, that looked really bad. And then Ed is fine. It's like, yeah, he sustained some cuts, but it was really nothing like what I thought it was. And all of this, Ed grabs him and says, you forget that since I have always been small and I did the fighting, I know exactly how a runt is going to try to win. And he slams his face into Salim's face, whose cheek begins to completely break apart. Meanwhile, Izumi has decided she's going to make with alchemy a huge crossbow, and she is just slamming Father with these stone bolts through the head, and like they don't really do anything, but it's still extremely badass. I'm not really going to quibble. Like, okay, sure, this eternal being of darkness and void isn't affected by your giant stone crossbow bolts. You can't win them all. You made a giant stone crossbow. I feel like that's really its own reward. So good for you. Full marks. A+. Can't wait to see what you come up with tomorrow. And just as Ed is about to like deliver a real blow on Salim, he gets gripped up by Father's weird tentacles along with the other 4, and he's got Father has Hempstool inside of him, so that's all 5, and he puts them down in their respective places, completely bound. They can't do a goddamn thing to stop what's happening. And then his face forms, and he says, "I'm done with indulging your frivolity." Which, I guess that's a way to say it. And we get another moment of this outside view with the eclipse that is happening. Soldiers just being like, yo, it is really dark out there. And there are several of these generals who had been in on this scheme tied up, and they are not in the right spot. And Kremen especially is just like, you have got to put us in the center of the circle. You have got to. We are going to be swallowed if we stay out here. He is really freaking out. That's the kind of thing where I'm like, he's going to break his own arms trying to get out of these bonds. Guys, it's like, knock him out or something. And then finally, the moon slides completely over the sun. We do get a bit here with Hugh's wife and his daughter watching the eclipse through that sort of film that you use to make it safe. And then we go to Father, who is so excited, like ear to ear, even though he has no ears, grinning. And he says, "It's time." And he's like, the energy that he is bringing it's like a kid waiting for midnight for Santa to show up. And the clock strikes and he thinks he hears the little tippy tap of hooves on the roof. He is so excited that I almost feel bad rooting against him, because this is like the kind of excitement that most villains have when they're about to do their evil thing. That excitement usually has a sardonic sort of... I'm trying to think of the word I want to use here, and all I keep coming up with is cynicism. There's an energy to those scenes usually that feels really smug, and that's not present here at all. It's truly sheer joy and excitement. He has been waiting for this forever. It's happening. It's working. There is nothing about this that feels like a human being who's seizing power. This feels like a child who's getting an awesome gift and cannot wait to take the paper off it. That kind of, So he says, have you ever considered the possibility that this planet of ours might in fact be a life form? Actually, it would be more accurate to refer to it as a vast nervous system, one that's retained its every memory since its inception and has witnessed the universe unfold. Just think of the massive quantity of information such a system would hold, and how much power one could gain if they opened the system's gateway. Have you ever considered that? And now that I have you gathered, I shall use you as sacrifices to open the planet's gateway. And then we see the beginnings of the transmutation circle starting, and all of a sudden, here's greed. I had completely and utterly forgotten all about greed. 100% did not cross my mind. This keeps happening. Greed keeps being a fucking key detail in scenes. And then I instantly forget him again. I don't know how this keeps happening. Every time. I'm just like, oh, right. Greed, Ling. Forgot. Dude, this is like the 5th time? Truly, there is just no excuse anymore. This is my bad. So yeah, he starts a fight and he's like, hope you don't mind me using it for myself. This world will finally belong to me. And Ed thinks for a second, oh sweet, Greed took Father down, and Father seems to like turn into a puddle. The eyes close, and Greed takes the eyes closing as defeat. And then of course Father is like, oh babe, I love that you think it didn't occur to me that you would do this. But you have to know, I am fully aware of what you're going to try, because I made you using the avarice inside myself. So anything that you want, I am going to already have wanted. And I will 100% be prepared. And he shifts everything slightly over and moves the center of this transmutation circle to the spot where the chair was that he had been set up on this whole time. And it turns out that he just had all of this prepared. And he's like, guy, this was kind of me fucking with you, actually. He says, the very center of this world is right here. And he slams his hand down on the little map that he had made with the figurines where he was trying to decide who was going to be sacrificed. And then we see the real start. And again, the excitement. I mean, this dude is loving it. And each of our people's got an eyeball opening up in the middle of their stomach. Each of them is clearly like, what is happening to me? While Pride looks on and he is enjoying every second of this. Greed is left standing and watching, and he doesn't try to interfere again. And I was sort of surprised by that. I thought that he would make one more attempt. But he just sort of stands by, I guess, assuming that, like, if his attack just did absolutely nothing, as it seemed to, that's kind of it, you know? And I can't see another option. He came at this dude, claws extended, ready to do damage, and it had no effect. So I guess, yeah, you are just going to stand there. So this is when that like tide of darkness begins to go up. And it's really weird because the edges of it have a sort of almost powdery look to them, like sand or something. But it's happening really fast, and I'm assuming it is just shadow. I don't know. And it rises so fast that the entire center of the city is completely covered, and the building in Central is almost covered. It's like got a couple of spires of their outside towers still sticking out, and otherwise it's like submerged. And Father starts like laughing to himself and is saying, "Oh, there is so much power. Let your gateways fight. Shed your energy for me." So I guess what he's saying is like, if you try and fight back, that only helps me. And he says, "I can barely contain it. Now that I've obtained enough power, I will open this planet's gateway." So this dark shadow in the middle then triggers the red outline of the alchemy transmutation circle. The alchemy based looking one that's got like the what do you call it? You got a, what's the name of the shape that's got 5? Is it a hexagon? I don't even know what you call that shape anymore, guys. I've forgotten elementary school stuff. And all of these like waving banners of little weird creepy black like shadow arms come up in the street, and people just start going down. It's like the arms just being around them are somehow sucking all of the life force and energy out of anybody who's nearby. Oh, Pentagon. Thank you, Zjagi. Appreciate you. I can't believe I didn't remember that. Now I have a picture of Father with a Christmas hat waiting for Santa in my head. Don't feel bad. I completely forgot about Greed as well when watching it for the first time. That does make me feel better, actually, I will say. So yeah, then we get like the slow pan all across the city, even the Führer's wife, and they are all on their faces, on the ground or collapsed against the desks or whatever. Everybody is being affected. We even go and see Pinnacle and Winry, which I truly felt like was just mean-spirited. And the two of them are on the floor. It's awful, guys. I really hate this. It's kind of a means of reconnecting with absolutely everybody that we have ever met in the entire series so far. Pretty much any person we have ever encountered, we check in with them and see that they are also being affected by this. And then we get this design that I thought was so cool. All of a sudden, a line just bisects this pentagon, as I have just recently been informed it is called. And it turns into the center of a pair of double doors that open upward like a giant... What it reminded me of was storm doors when you have like a basement. And they open upward, and Father climbs up out of this like he's stepping out of his coffin. And he is this huge shape. It is, with the one eyeball, the teeth, extremely unsettling. Do not like. And he looks up at the fucking moon and sun and says, "Hear me, God. I demand you answer the cry of my soul. Come to me." And another door opens in the sky. And there's another eye in that door. And he says, a bunch of like the banners of arms come down. He grabs them and he starts pulling on them. And he says, "Yes, I will no longer be bound to you or your consequences. I will force you down to this earth and into my bowels. You have no choice but to be absorbed." And as he pulls, we get a really far away view of like a sort of dome that explodes out over the city. And it's like a nuclear explosion or something. And that is the end of the episode, is this like flash of white light. So this entire time, you know, I've been asking, like, what do they want? What do the homunculi want? What are they trying to do? Do they want to rule everything like they kind of do already? What more is there? And I was thinking today about, like, why would you separate out your the sinful aspects of your personality? Like, I don't get what it is that he is trying to do. And I still don't have a real good answer, but I'm just assuming if he's trying to absorb God, does he think that it will only work if he is free of sin? So he has to get those out and then it will work? And also, like, no offense, dude, but you're not free of sin. You may think that you have separated them off, but you also are just about to sacrifice like an entire planet full of people. So I feel like that's not going to be kosher. Also, the eye that shows up in the other doorway is different, right? And I have said that I was sort of confused at the difference between the dwarf in the jar and the mysterious, like, white outline figure that they see when they go through the other portal. And it felt like they were the same, but it also didn't. And I am not sure if the doors that are opening here are supposed to be the same as the two sets of double doors in the portal. I have to assume that they are. But, you know, there's the doors that you walk through when you first come in, and then, like, Al's body is sitting in front of the other set of doors directly across. And when Ed came in the first time, he turned and went back out the same doors. I don't know. Zdegi says, I only recently realized that Father has to do all this on a solar eclipse because here the moon and sun overlap, making them a symbol for a perfect being / God. So that's why God's portal opens there. I was sort of thinking that as well. Or even like, because there's almost the action that he takes is almost like he's just trying to reach up and grab them both at once. Like, it's like he's planned it so it'll be easiest to scoop them up with one hand, and them being completely perfectly overlapped. Like, it does make sense to me. This is I have no problem with that at all. And I appreciate it too, because like so much of the stories out there where you need like a specific star alignment or planet alignment or something like this, like an eclipse, they just don't really convince me that the thing they need to do that day really needs that eclipse or whatever. Like sometimes they come up with reasons, but it always sort of feels like you just needed to give this a time limit, and this was the time limit. Okay, I'm playing along, that's fine. But because of the way that this universe has transmutation circles working already, the physical symbols that are drawn are obviously actually super important. And I completely buy that the position of these two overlapping would be extremely significant. No problem with that at all. But now the question is, like, is the dwarf in the flask and the white outline being, are they two different things? I have been thinking that they were the same. They didn't feel quite the same, but I just kind of was like, nah, I don't know. They seem the same. And I genuinely don't know what to make of that anymore. The thing that I keep thinking of is, you know, the concept of Lucifer being in hell and the punishment that he suffers is just being separated from God. And that is supposed to be, if you're like doing a real sort of Puritan interpretation of what hell is supposed to be. Hell is meant to be the absence of God. It's not like a torture chamber. It's just that you are completely separated from the energy that binds all living things together, and you are just not part of that anymore. And that's your punishment, is you don't get to be part of the one. And maybe that's some of what's at play here, that it's supposed to be this void wants to be like filled, is desperate for something, because it's just this like emptiness, and it's trying to connect with something that is everything, because it feels like, you know what I'm saying? Which is a wild idea that I really rather like, but I don't know if that's what we're doing here or not, because I can't even really get a hold of what each of them is. Damien says, I would have said this last episode, but Cloudflare had to be a poop. The major blatant spoiler in the current opening was Roy's blindness. It's front and center in the middle of the opening. Oh my God. What is with these shows doing this? I know I've already gone on this rant, so I won't do it again, but genuinely, I mean, come on. It's just rude. And usually when I say rude, I mean like in a cute way, but it's really genuinely actually rude. I'm not being cute. It's like a move that feels extremely thoughtless and shitty. Zijiegi says, yeah, I previously just took it as the circle only activates when there is a solar eclipse, which was just no real reason at all, but I just hand waved it away. And look, I wouldn't even be that mad if that were it either. I mean, it would be, you know, because I am, like you're saying, Zijiegi, I would hand wave it because, like, so many things, that's sort of how it goes. Oh yeah, we just need a solar eclipse or else it won't work. And that's all they say, and you're just like, yeah, all right. That's like 50% of what you read out there, you know? So I wouldn't be mad about it. But there is and also the way that they overlap looks like an eye, which is the symbol of all of the things, you know? It looks like an iris in the center of an eyeball, and everything is eyes with these creatures. So that also works. Zijiegi, anime openings are wild. I never watch them if I haven't seen a show. Yeah, the only time that I have accidentally started to watch an opening and then sort of caught myself and been like, wait, oh right, I'm not supposed to watch this, was luckily One Piece when they have that song Bon Voyage, and it starts off with like all of this imagery like they're on vacation. And I was so startled at how weird the way they decided to go for that was. And I was watching it like, why are they all just standing at the edge of a cliff brushing their teeth together? What is this? And then all of a sudden, some pirate that I hadn't yet met is on the screen, and I was like, oh, right, I can't watch this. And I like turned away. I don't even remember what the pirate looked like anymore. It might have been Foxy. But yeah, that was like, this just, you can never tell. Some of these things, it's just like all spoilers, and then some of it's like just weird imagery that they thought, well, what if we just have our guys do some fun stuff? And we'll never actually see them do this in the show, but we'll definitely have it be part of this opening for reasons. Anyway, so like this darkness that has overcome everything isn't what's sapping everybody's strength. It's not until the waving banner arms appear. They look like the arms from a wacky waving inflatable arm waving tube man. Those are the thing that begins to like cause people to drop. The darkness is separate. And I don't know what to make of that either. And I don't know whether we're getting an explanation for every little thing. So part of me is like hesitant to even start theorizing or asking questions, because I don't want to just run down a rabbit hole and then find out we don't ever really get an explanation for that because it's not actually that important and I wasted a bunch of time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I want to ask the questions because so far the show has tended to answer a lot of things. One thing they haven't, that I don't know if maybe it's explained more in depth in the manga and they just didn't bother in the show, the way that transmutation circles work at all has never been explained. And that I kind of wish we got a little bit more about. Just the principle behind what the symbols on the outside edges mean, what the connections between all of the lines are meant to represent. Like, there's definitely aspects of like elements and senses and whatever, but I would like more, because it feels that there's a very particular like concept behind the alchemy and alkahestry circles and the way they're designed. I feel like that has to be done with a very like specific sort of theory behind it. And I would just sort of like to know more about that. And maybe there's something like ancillary material out there that after I finish the series, you guys can like share in the Discord chat or something. But yeah, there's just a lot about all of this that feels still sort of mysterious. And it is dancing on the edge of, it's not thoroughly explained so that you can make almost anything happen, which is something that I have a little bit of like a side eye for, as you guys know. It's not too bad. They do have specific rules for things, and I really do appreciate that. But because so much happens that they're like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. Bringing in alkahestry as a whole other sort of discipline is interesting. Then, you know, finding out now from you guys, like, I didn't even take it this way, but realizing that Scar was only able to do destruction, and that is something that like is apparently kind of unheard of. It's feels like there's a lot of potential for other things to just show up, other powers. So I don't know. We'll see. Damien says, I think it's something real life can explain, since a lot of it is from real life alchemical research. Real life is capitalized. And I'll tell you what, Damien, I think you just mean actual real life. But when you capitalized it, I thought that there was going to be some ancillary book that you were going to point me to called Real Life, and that it was in there. I did not. I took that way too literally is what I'm saying. So my apologies. Everything lately is just me misinterpreting shit. What are you going to do? All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up. This is quite an episode. Damn. All right. Thank you guys again so much for coming and hanging out with me. Thank you again to Max for commissioning all of this. I cannot believe how close we are to over. I'm going to say that every time. And until next week, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.